Is this democracy in decline? We're in Cambodia to see how the government seems to be tightening its grip on power. I'm Imran Garta, and today's Newsmaker is Cambodia's political crackdown. It's been 1 month since Cambodia's main opposition party was dissolved and its members banned from politics. It couldn't have come at a better time for Prime Minister Hun Sen, who's facing re-election next year. In fact, many see him as the driving force behind the banning of Cambodia's National Rescue Party. And now, with no real challengers, Hun Sen is almost certain to extend his 32 years in power. So, how free and fair will the 2018 election be? Here's Sandra Gatman with the first in a series of special reports from Cambodia.
In the spiritual heart of Cambodia, 5,000 Buddhist monks gather for a rare and ancient ritual. A special ceremony convened by the ruling party to bring peace and prosperity to the nation. At the majestic Angkor Wat Temple, mass prayer is believed to be the most powerful.
I'm here to wish happiness, peace, and development for my country.
Our country really needs peace. We don't want war in Cambodia.
Prime Minister Hun Sen says he wants to send a message to the rest of the world that Cambodia is not in anarchy nor in a state of war, and that things here are running smoothly.
Cambodians have enjoyed more than a generation of peacetime, and the economy is growing at a record pace. It's the kind of stability the Prime Minister wants to protect, and why last month the Supreme Court dissolved the CNRP, Cambodia's only real opposition party. Critics say it was a move designed to avoid a likely defeat in next year's election.
If you look at what happened in 2013, many of the young people turned out on the street and actually protest. But more importantly, the voting turnout was really high in 2013. And then you look at what happened early this year, during the communal election. The popular votes came very, very close, scarily close for some.
There's little trace left of the once popular CNRP. More than 100 of its members have been banned from politics for the next 5 years. Its headquarters are abandoned, and its leaders have fled the country. One supporter told us he feels lost.
We're waiting for the CNRP to get international help. Most of us just won't vote next year because we don't support the other parties.
Son Chai is one of the last opposition leaders still in Cambodia. He thinks people will eventually take to the streets.
Is it over now for the CNRP?
No. I think the CNRP is over when the people are no longer supporting the party. When they learn that the only party who represents great majority of the people and have been dissolved against their will, it makes people very, very angry. If you cannot convince people to go on your side, you don't know when the people are going to do something against you.
The ruling party's reach has always been vast. CPP posters are plastered across the country, but space for dissent is shrinking fast. Since August, nearly a dozen independent radio stations have lost their licenses, and the Cambodia Daily, a critical English-language newspaper, has been shut down. A growing number of human rights groups have also been accused of colluding with the opposition and threatened with closure.
We are surveilled, we are harassed. Many NGOs are facing legal charges, administrative sanctions. There's so little space to do just normal activities.
The Cambodian government denies it's leading a witch hunt. We met one of the CPP's only available spokesmen, who is keen to explain that his party is protecting itself against external powers trying to topple an elected majority.
The principle of democracy, the majority rule, and the minority never have a legitimacy to fight, to move any activity to against institution. They have no right to do that. The Western, they handle like a minority as opposition party.
But you know how this looks to the outside world when NGOs are being closed down, media outlets are being silenced, and people aren't allowed by law to protest on the streets.
The media never, comply with the government rule. We ask them like years to comply, but we get more than 1,000 NGOs still working freely over here. They should talk, they should share experience with those people. They are, they do, compliance to the government. They do what they want to help the Cambodia, not to they plan to build up a network to topple the government from the people.
In the eyes of the West, Cambodia is going down a dark road, away from democracy. The US and European Union have already pulled electoral aid and slapped sanctions on the Prime Minister's inner circle. And now the European Parliament wants to stop tax-free imports from Cambodia. It would hurt a $5 billion garment industry, and factory workers are worried.
People are talking about it here. We make shoes to export, but if the factories close down, we will have no jobs or money to send to our family.
These women barely make ends meet as it is. After a quick bite to eat, they're all heading back to the factory to work overtime. Sunchai is hopeful the government might turn things around.
Cambodia is a unique, country. You look at this river here, I just told you, from November onward, they will flow back to this direction. So if a river can flow in both directions, and a monarchy who have been overthrown and can return to the throne, only a unique thing happened to Cambodia. So one must...
The tide can turn in politics.
Yeah, one must stay positive. I think the international community are interested enough about Cambodia that can help the leader here to at least change their mind.
Well, joining me now from the Spanish city of Seville is Mu Sok Hua. She's the vice president of the dissolved opposition Cambodia National Rescue Party. And in Phnom Penh, Buntet Cham, he's the founder and president of the Young Leadership Forum. I thank you both for joining us. Mu Sok Hua, it's great to have you on the program. Thanks so much for joining us. Is your party finished now that it has been dissolved by Hun Sen?
Thank you. No, it's not finished at all. To the contrary, the Cambodian National Rescue Party, the only opposition party in Cambodia, will survive because over 3 million Cambodians voted for change to remove Mr. Hun Sen democratically from power. And the people of Cambodia need change. The Cambodian National Rescue Party, my party, will continue to fight for democracy. That's the only way to put Cambodia back on track for true development, justice for our people.
Mu Sok Hua, how does it work? We have Sam Rainsy outside of the country in exile. You're outside of the country in exile. We have Kem Sokha, who is in jail. And, people are hopeful that this won't lead to treason trial, but it might. And the treason charges might actually hold up. So how do you actually see a path to democratically taking power when all the odds seem to be stacked against you in the face of being completely dissolved and banned?
Because we believe in the power of the people. For 25 years, the people of Cambodia at the grassroots level have planted the seeds. And those seeds for democracy will stay and will grow bigger and bigger. We have done everything we can as Cambodians inside Cambodia. And the international community has its own commitment by signing the peace accord in 1991 to bring peace to Cambodia. The obligations, the requirements in the peace accord says that the international community, the signatories of the accord, must promote, must protect democracy and human rights, free and fair elections. That is now the time for the international community to bring up to their obligations of the Paris Peace Accord.
Okay, and we will be talking about the international community in a few minutes' time. Buntet, let me ask you about what the street thinks about the opposition. Because whether the claim is true or not, that Kem Sokha and the CNRP had been trying to push for a color revolution in Cambodia, those are the charges. They believe that this has been pushing from inside and asking the Americans and others for help. I want to ask you, do people on the streets of Phnom Penh actually believe that about the opposition and about Kem Sokha?
I don't really think so. I think people are still, they want change, but they don't want to, what I can say, you know, take overs other people and then take, we can say, a big revolution against one group and then raise up another one. Cambodian people, they just want a good job, they want economy, they want better education, they want proper life. They want a society where they have freedom to live. To say that opposition party try to, you know, try to revolute the society, try to take over the countries through, you know, not through free and fair election. I don't think that would be the purpose of the opposition party, and I don't think that that's the will of the Cambodian people.
Buntet, do you believe that Hun Sen is a dictator?
I think he do things based on what he fear. Nobody is a dictator and nobody is a democrat. But when you live in the condition of fear of losing power, you can do whatever you can in order to protect yourself, to protect your own safety and position. So I don't think he really that, you know, bad as seen as a dictator. What I see is that he live in fear, and the opposition party keep putting him and his people in fear. They are not trying to fight against the things that matter, but they attack him and attack his people personally. I think that's what he tried to do in order to protect himself and protect his people, his interests. So that's the thing he tried to do. To me, to see him as a dictator, I don't think he's you know, that bad. But to say that his action is a little bit aggressive, I think it's aggressive. It's of course it's aggressive, but I think the fear inside him motivates him to take that kinds of aggressive action.
Okay. Musa Kwa, I know you mentioned the international community and you feel they need to live up to their obligations. You'd be interested to hear what the Cambodian government spokesperson, Sipan Pai, had to say to us. Let me tell you a little bit of what he had to say. He said the CNRP plays a role of rebellion by boycotts, choosing not to sit in the assembly, and they go around the world asking foreign governments to work against the elected Cambodian government. They also ask foreign governments to cut all assistance as well as refrain from investing in Cambodia or boycotting Cambodian products, which will work against farmers and factory workers in Cambodia's growth. Now, that's Sipan Pai, as I mentioned, the state secretary at the Office of the Council of Ministers. Musa Kwa, doesn't he have a bit of a point here? Because even our own correspondent found that factory workers, factory owners are really afraid that any international stranglehold and sanctions on the government will invariably hurt them, will invariably hurt ordinary Cambodian people.
I think what hurts more is that right now, the people of Cambodia have lost their rights, their freedom, their liberties to freedom of speech. What hurts more is that if we have Mr. Hun Sen for another 5 to 10 years, our natural resources will be sold, will be given away as land concessions, economic concessions to China, to other companies that are his cronies. What hurts more, what people fear more, is that more and more of our youth will cross the border to come to Thailand to be migrant workers, undocumented workers. We are looking for solutions for real economic growth for Cambodia, for social development, for true sustainable development without having to sell Cambodia to other powers. What we want from Mr. Hun Sen is free, fair, and inclusive elections. We do not want Mr. Hun Sen to sell Cambodia to other countries. We want our people to be part of development. We want our youth to have jobs inside the country. We want our workers to work with minimum wage, with decent wage. We want our land and our farmers to have their own land. We are not talking about revolution.
Right.
And the economic sanctions that will be imposed by the EU, by the United States, is not what we want. We want solutions, and that's only through free, fair, and inclusive elections, not to have us living in exile, not to have the court take us to prison without real justice, not to have a leader in jail as what is happening right now.
Right. Buntet, do you think that Hun Sen cares about the sanctions, given that, as Musa Kwa mentioned, he can turn to the Chinese and that Cambodia is doing business with the Chinese? So does he care if the United States or the European Union or both of them decide to grab hold of the economy a little bit and close things up a bit? Can't he just turn to China?
Well, I think he's already turned to China, but I don't think he really wants to take himself really away from US and European communities, because there's a lot of things that Cambodian benefit from those two major markets. I think he will put this, he will hold this a little bit tight, especially with the political situation in the countries. But to say that he will take himself away from Europe and US, I don't think so. But if the US and Europe will push him, I think that's the only choice, that he will go to China, and he already there. So he will get support from China. But Cambodia, even there's a major support from China, Cambodia will still suffer economically, politically, socially. If there's not a very good reconciliation, negotiation, talking between those three major countries, markets, and then the talk between the opposition and the ruling party, I think Cambodia will suffer automatically.
Buntet, do you think that that could still happen? I mean, we're just barely days away from 2018, and there's going to be an election in 2018. Do you think that that is still possible, that Cambodia can have a free and fair election that everybody recognizes as free and fair, where the opposition and the government are both happy that this is an even playing field and that there won't be any protests about the validity of the elections? Is that still possible, or is the 2018 election already tarnished?
Actually, the election in Cambodia, I think you can ask Madam Suk, who was there. There's never been free and fair in Cambodia. I think we got one a little bit free and fair, as quite accepted by majority of Cambodian people in 1993. But afterwards, Cambodia had never experienced a free and fair election. And to say that 2018 is going to be a very free and fair or a tarnished elections, Cambodian election they have never been free and fair, and it will never going to be free and fair again in the future. I think the only thing that those top people need to do now is that consider about free and fair election is an impossible thing right now. The things that is more possible is to figure out what is the problems that these two top political parties keep attacking and fighting one another. They are not just trying to figure out the solutions, the thing that really matters Cambodian the most. Just talking about election and then challenge for power. What are the solutions? What are the things that they've been working so hard during 1980s that can reach to Paris Peace Agreement? They need to go back to that, not just kick Prime Minister Hun Sen out from power and then replaced by another one. He's not ready to lose his power, I think. He's not ready to give up, because if he give up, he would feel that he would become the oppressed. And the current opposition party will become the oppressor, and he will become the victims. So I think the Prime Minister is not ready for free and fair election. And I think the opposition party need to play their roles to make sure that free and fair election is just start from them, so that they need to pay more attention on policies rather than just attacking the top ruling elites, you know.
Okay, understood.
Work more on policy.
Understood. That's a root and branch approach that you want. Let me ask you, Musokwa, because we are running out of time, about the religious establishment, because we have Cambodia's top monastic leader. If our viewers don't know, the Supreme Patriarch Tep Vong, who endorsed the government, said the Cambodian government, led by Prime Minister Hun Sen, has done many great things that we need to appreciate. We have Buddhism, we have peace, unity and prosperity. If we lose them, we will die. The opposition has never won an election anyway. The winner of the election is predetermined. Do you feel, Musokwa, do you feel let down by the religious establishment?
No, I think the institutions today in Cambodia are in the hands of Mr. Hun Sen. That's why we keep repeating the same thing. The people have made the decisions through elections, whether it's free or not free, but at least over 3 million, which is 45% of the people, have said enough is enough. Let's have free and fair elections. The monarchs, the institutions in Cambodia, the judiciary, the police, the army are all in the hands of Mr. Hun Sen. It's a one-party man, it's a one-party show. Cambodia deserves better. Democracy is the only way for Cambodia to move forward. The opposition party, members of parliament, I myself have worked very hard to promote policy for true economic, social development that bring justice for the people of Cambodia. And that's why the opposition, with our policy, have been able to attract more and more voters. Mr. Hun Sen needs to be fair to the people, needs to be brave and compete with us, and so allow us to go back home so that we can compete freely, fairly, and peacefully so that the people can make their own choice. We are ready for that. Mr. Hun Sen has the time, so we can go back home, find a solution, national reconciliation, then avoid the sanctions imposed by the EU and by the United States, and pretty soon, maybe from Australia, from Canada, and other countries. We don't want that. We want a solution, and that solution, Mr. Hun Sen has the time to talk with us, we all talk together and find a solution for the people, which is through free, fair, and inclusive elections.
Musokwa and Buntet Cham, it's been a pleasure learning more about your country. We will continue to follow your country very keenly. I thank you both for joining us here on the Newsmakers. Still ahead on the Newsmakers, Pakistan orders more than 20 foreign charities out of the country. We ask what's behind the decision. And Libyan General Khalifa Haftar declares the rival Tripoli government illegitimate. Is he making a move for power? The UN-backed peace deal in Libya could now be over. The country's renegade general Khalifa Haftar declared it ink on paper. It was brokered in 2015 as a means to unite warring factions. But so far, it hasn't worked. The Tripoli government is internationally recognized, but Haftar has declared it illegitimate. So, is Libya's strongman positioning himself to be the next leader? Well, to discuss this, I'm joined here on set by Mohammed Al-Jarrah. He's a Libyan affairs analyst at the Atlantic Council and the founder and CEO of Libya Outlook. And we also have TRT World producer and defense analyst Ubay Shahbander. Gentlemen, good to talk to you. Let me start with you, Mohammed. Why is Haftar doing this right now? Is it because he senses that the other side is weak?
It is. The 17th of December has always been an opportunity for Haftar to basically declare the internationally recognized government, which he never actually recognized. If we go back, it was always illegitimate and not recognized by Khalifa Haftar. He's basically using this momentum to try and argue his case to the Libyan people and also to the international community. He made it very clear that despite the pressures from the international community that the voice of the Libyan people is what will matter in deciding who leads the country. The question is he interested in going for the elections, for example, that Libya might be holding next year? Or is he thinking about assuming power in a different way? There was a campaign in eastern Libya, for example, petitions collecting some signatures to basically authorize Khalifa Haftar to take over power. And the committee that was in charge of that claimed that they collected 1.6 million signatures that authorize Khalifa Haftar to take over power. So I think he's interested in assuming power. I think he's keeping his options wide open whether to go for an election, but he already questioned the elections, questions the higher elections committee, and he said it had to be moved out of Tripoli, and he also questioned the voter registration records. But at the same time, on the ground in Tobruk and in eastern Libya, there has been some campaigning on the ground that he might be interested in assuming power in an undemocratic way. It's also an option.
Yeah, interesting times. Now, Ubay, if you're the UN and you cobbled together this agreement between the two sides 2 years ago, and you also throw your backing behind one guy in Tripoli, Siraj, and now the other guy who might well have more military power on the ground says, I don't recognize any of this. Are you freaking out right now?
Well, General Haftar really dropped a bombshell yesterday when he announced essentially two things: that the internationally recognized government in Tripoli as being illegitimate, and that he would listen to the will of the people. So essentially declaring the UN, in this 2-year UN process to bring both warring factions together to unify the government under a unified accord. General Haftar rejected that outright and rejected essentially the work of the UN mission to Libya. So it's clear that Haftar is doing, one thing here, and he's positioning himself to become potentially the next leader of Libya. He's got, as you said, a strong army. Many call it a militia. He calls it the Libyan National Army. They've been fighting the Islamists. They've been fighting the extremists. Haftar claims that he's bringing law and order to parts of Libya that for years after the fall of Gaddafi had seen nothing but chaos and destruction. He could potentially be the next savior of Libya. At least that's how he wants the Libyan people to view himself.
Yeah, well, the ironic twist being that you need someone who's a bit like Gaddafi in order to bring back some sort of stability, according to some, right? But then others would consider that completely insane. All that effort and trouble in 2011 to get rid of Gaddafi. Mohammed, remind us, because we say internationally recognized government of Siraj, and clearly the bulk of the international community supports his government. But Haftar is not just himself and his army. Remind us of who also supports Haftar and are against the UN's candidate.
First of all, being internationally recognized government through a UN Council resolution, it does not mean automatically that you are legitimate or recognized in Libya. Since 2015, the Government of National Accord struggled to get the vote of confidence from the internationally recognized House of Parliament, which is also in Tobruk. And the head or the president of the parliament, Aguila Saleh, supported Khalifa Haftar and brought him to where he is today, promoting him, naming him as the commander, the general commander of the army, etc. But also there is a coalition of eastern tribes that support Khalifa Haftar. Externally speaking, also there is Egypt, the UAE, despite the fact that they pay lip service to the UN process and to the fact that Sarraj is recognized, but they continue to support the Libyan National Army and its leader as the legitimate military entity that is recognized by the House of Representatives in the East. Whilst in Tripoli, you have the Government of National Accord that's supposedly legitimate, controls Libya's central bank and also the oil revenues and so on. But when it comes to military power on the ground, that government relies on a very fragile coalition of militias that are in and around in Tripoli. Recently, they have been gaining some momentum in Tripoli, but I question that it would be enough for them to actually establish some legitimate use over the use of force, even in areas that are under their control. And recently, we have been discussing, for example, the issue of slaves auctions and criminal networks that are operating in areas under the control of the Government of National Accord, which is an indication of how weak this internationally recognized government and also the troubles that it keeps facing in Libya day after day.
Okay, so you have a broken government on the one hand. And let me ask you again, Mohammed, broken government on the one hand, clearly they're not able to keep this place running properly. They'll say we inherited a big mess. But on the other hand, you have a man whose army is accused of all manner of atrocities as well, executing civilians, for example. So he might oust Daesh in a town or a city. He might get rid of an extremist group. But they're doing terribly unspeakable things as well, and he's not democratically elected. Is the international community faced with a kind of false dichotomy here? Who do you choose?
There is definitely a false dichotomy here. And I don't think it's helpful to try and choose either between Khalifa Haftar or the weak government that opposes him or that he opposes. And yes, absolutely, the Libyan National Army, its leadership and some of its members have been accused of human rights abuses. And the International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant against Mahmoud al-Warfali, for example, who has been accused of summary executions of some alleged Daesh fighters. But the point here for the international community, if anything as such exists, is to make sure that they pressure all the different sides. Because who supports Khalifa Haftar and who supports Sarraj? It's Italy, it's France, it's the UAE, it's Turkey, Qatar, etc.
Right.
These are key players, and these players need to actually work in the same direction at having a stable government that has legitimate authority. That could be through consensus politics, but also it could be through elections if we manage to get there. But to make it a choice between a weak government that is dominated by militias or a dictatorship is really dangerous for Libya's future.
Obey, let's talk politics for a second, and I have to leave you gentlemen soon because we have to move on. But internationally, when you look at the voters in, for example, the United States or in France or elsewhere, they don't want to touch Libya, do they? Because they say, look, in 2011 we intervened, and it's a big mess now 6 years later. You're telling us we need to do more right now. So is it this balancing act between doing just a little bit to show that you're involved but not doing too much? Because we burnt ourselves in 2011. We ousted Gaddafi, but the place is a complete dystopia right now.
Absolutely. Many of these Western capitals view the NATO-led effort to support the uprising against Gaddafi as essentially having failed by allowing a myriad of extremist groups to proliferate from Libya into Europe. In fact, just not that long ago, many saw connections between agents of the Libyan Islamic Fighting Group and Ansar as-Sunnah to the Manchester City terror attacks and other foiled terror plots in Europe. We've heard it from Washington, where President Trump clearly, his agenda on Libya is counterterrorism focus. Not much talk about governance, not much talk about supporting an institutionalized process to rebuild, to help the Libyan people rebuild a unified government. So it's very clear at this point that these Western capitals just want to see Libya contained. They don't want to see the migrants crossing the Mediterranean. They don't want to see any factional fighting spill over into Europe or potentially enable terror groups that still, some of them still have operational bases in Libya to proliferate internationally. So at this point, the Western capitals are treating Libya with a very standoffish attitude.
Yeah, they don't have great appetite, right? And they feel burnt. Mohammed, let me ask you, what are the chances of Haftar and Sarraj talking to each other, meeting, sitting down, thrashing out some sort of agreement in the near future? Zero?
It's very difficult. They had 2 years to actually sit together. They sat together. They met in Abu Dhabi. They met in Paris. Nothing came out of this. It looks as if there is not a genuine interest in actually making their relationship work or have an agreement that can actually work for Libya. And this makes me wonder what 2018 will bring. And it most likely will bring a little bit more instability in the country, especially if we don't have an agreement on an election or on a unity government through consensus. If we don't manage to find that agreement, I think we will witness more instability in the country and more confrontations, most likely in and around Tripoli and also in the central region of Libya.
Yeah, it's not looking too good for the moment. Mohammed Al-Jarrah and Ubay Shabanda, thank you very much for joining us on the Newsmakers.
With this policy, there will be no permission to do any kind of work that might affect Pakistan's financial, social, strategic, national, or security interests. We are making everything transparent and online.
60 days to shut up shop. That's the order given to more than 20 foreign-funded charities in Pakistan, including one founded by billionaire philanthropist George Soros. Their applications to re-register were rejected under new, stricter regulations. Since the killing of Osama bin Laden in 2011, Pakistan has become more hostile towards foreign aid groups. Back then, the country's intelligence services accused Save the Children of working with the CIA to find the former al-Qaeda leader, something the charity categorically denies. But Islamabad is still wary. So, do they have legitimate concerns, or is this a clampdown that will just hurt those most in need? Well, to discuss this, we're joined from Islamabad by Talat Masood. He's a former Pakistani military general. Also, we have Nargis Khan. She's the acting director and policy communications advisor at the Pakistan Humanitarian Forum, which represents many of the charities. And to complete our panel, we have security and political analyst Tariq Parvez. I thank you all for joining us. Talat Masood, let me begin with you, sir. Do you think this is a good decision by the state?
Well, it all depends. The people, the sort of organizations that they have disqualified and have not allowed them to operate anymore, if they were genuinely involved and engaged in activity which was subversive and acting against the interests of Pakistan, then they are justified. But one had to be more open about that, and I think the people of Pakistan should have known more about that. But I would say that I'm sure that they would have gone through the records very thoroughly because it would be a sad reflection if there had been any omission on their part as regards the integrity of these people. So whereas some of the NGOs are doing very good work in Pakistan, the fact is that some have been penetrated by the CIA and other intelligence agencies, including the Indians. So Pakistan is very wary of it, and especially, as you mentioned in your opening remarks, that because of our experience of Osama bin Laden, the fact remains that some of the NGOs do have in the past conducted themselves in such a way that they have made the Pakistani government and the intelligence agencies far more suspicious and have to be far more careful than what they have been in the past. And then the present regional scenario is such where there is so much of hostility from India and also in a way from Afghanistan, and the Americans are also not very happy with Pakistan and keep on threatening. So it is very logical that Pakistan takes certain steps so as to protect the integrity of Pakistan and also to ensure that they do not engage in these subversive activities.
Okay, so Nargis Khan, according to Talat Masood, who sounds quite hopeful that there is evidence if this is going down that route, he feels that at least some of these aid agencies have been penetrated by the CIA and India. Do you feel, Nargis, that the government has reasonable cause for suspicion and that's why they're being overcautious here?
First of all, let me start by saying that the Pakistan Humanitarian Forum and our members have been strongly supportive and committed with the government to ensure that there is regulation of the NGO sector. We've been working with the government since 2013 on this. So, I mean, right now, I can only really comment on what I know. You know, 11 of our member organisations have received a letter not approving their registration, and not a single one of them has actually been given a reason as to why this has happened. And, you know, for us, right now, what we're calling for is, you know, transparency, you know, a justifiable and, you know, transparent appeal process, which is also dignified. You know, many of these organisations are right now on the ground. They are working with some of the poorest communities. And many of these organisations in 2018, the 11 organisations alone have got $125 million committed to Pakistan. And this would be reaching 8.7 million people with safe drinking water, with basic services in health, you know, with education. And for us, it's about being realistic. Right now, the government are saying, we're going to give you no reason, but you've got 60 days to close your organisations. I mean, I don't understand where the transparency is here.
Okay, let me ask Tariq Parvez, does it bother you that the government has failed to produce any tangible evidence of spying? If somebody's spying, why don't you identify it and try them?
Very simple. You know, when you have spying agencies engaged in the business of working against the interests of state, you do catch them, you do lay your hand on them, but you don't disclose your sources. Because in the world of intelligence, if you start disclosing your sources and laying the evidence to the public, you are really compromising your sources and your credibility in the business of intelligence. So the governments have to be very careful. If you speak to Washington, they'll tell you the same thing. If you talk to Moscow, they'll tell you the same thing. If you talk to ISI in Islamabad, they'll give you the same reason.
Okay, so Mr. Pierre, what you're suggesting, certainly.
They'll give you the same reason.
Okay, fair enough. So what you're suggesting is Doctors Without Borders, MSF, Open Society Foundations, ActionAid must be guilty because the government has given them 60 days to leave. These guys who do big, important work all over the world, they have to have done something wrong because disclosing the sources would compromise Pakistan's security. That's the meaning of what you said, isn't it?
Absolutely. What I'm saying is that you have to be very careful in today's world, especially, remember, Pakistan is not going through normal circumstances. We are a victim of US foreign policy for the last 40 years. We are a victim of Indian foreign policy, which is a policy of sheer hostility for the last, since the birth of Pakistan. Then we have a new Afghanistan run by Ashraf Ghani and guided by and instructed by Washington, who are playing a very dirty game. So there is terrorism in Pakistan. You saw what happened in Quetta yesterday. So let me answer your question in a very specific way. Pakistan must make as much room as possible to the NGOs that are doing good work. And this is one reason 70 NGOs have been granted permission to work after the new regulations. 70. 23, I think 21 or 23, they have been banned. And then there are 20-some which are under reconsideration. So there is no hostility that I detect in the policy of Pakistan towards any NGO per se.
Talat Masood, why don't they bring forward any evidence? Because again, from what I'm hearing from Tariq Parvez and a little bit from you, although I don't think you fully agree with him, is that you have deep faith in the fact that the state must be doing something right in the absence of producing any evidence. Tell me why you have that deep faith.
Well, I would say that the state should come out with certain evidence because although I know that argument that the intelligence agencies don't want to disclose, but there is no such thing as not telling the NGOs that it is because of this reason that we cannot possibly allow you to continue, because we have come to know, I mean, the fact remains that just like you said that, you know, the ones like working for Without Borders, these doctors have been and nurses have been extremely helpful in certain circumstances in Pakistan, in very adverse circumstances. And I am rather surprised that they also have been banned. So there are certain organizations which also carry an international reputation. And it is in the interest of Pakistan, it is in the interest of Pakistan's prestige as well as credibility that a certain level of information must be given as to why these very prestigious organizations are not being allowed to function. But certainly those organizations which have been engaged in subversive activities and there is evidence, they may not disclose the evidence, they may not disclose the sources, but they can definitely say that they have been working against the interests of the state.
Okay, Tariq, you want to come in? Come in.
Yeah, look, what I am saying is that was just one aspect of concern for the Pakistani government. But then there are other areas. For example, there are organizations and have been organizations. For example, take the case of Red Cross. You know, just a few years ago, you can talk to their staff and you can take them into confidence. They'll tell you that it's not the organization itself, but the foreign agencies who were able to hire a couple of people in those organizations, and that actually brought down a spectrum of restrictions against that very NGO.
Okay.
Can I
yeah,
sorry to
Nargis,
can I come in here?
Nargis, come in.
Yeah, I just want to come in that, I mean, I'm not in the business of talking about conspiracy theories. I want to go back to the reality of the situation right now. There's 11 organisations that haven't been given any reasons as to why they've received a letter that then tells them, oh, look, we're not going to give you a reason, but you've not been approved, but we're going to give you 60 days to make an appeal, a representation. I mean, this is an appeal process. They've then been given 90 days while this appeal will be heard. And now we're talking about foreign agents. We employ over 6,000 national staff. In our organisations, we've got 63 members. At the last count, we had about 15 foreign expatriates. So, you know, these are Pakistani nationals working in these organisations, and these are 8.7 million people that in 2018 won't get the services that they should have been receiving.
Okay,
what I want to know is, what is a dignified plan to hand over to the government?
Okay, good
You know,
point.
it's about having a dialogue.
Okay, good point. So, Tariq, here's the thing. Even with limited legal recourse, the burden of proof is on you. You have to prove a negative. How do you prove that you're not CIA or not Mossad or not RAWC? I mean, this is impossible, isn't it?
Very, very simple. Very simple. All you have to do is state your goals, show what you have been able to accomplish in the past, and give the data, share the profile of your staff with the government of Pakistan and the necessary concerns, departments of the government of Pakistan. And I think this is why I said,
can I just come in here once again? I'd like to come in here.
Hold on.
Every single one of these organisations have shared the details. They've been sharing information for 2 years.
Please. Yeah, you have to. This is the way it works. If you don't share information,
but for 2 years they've been sharing information. Every single one of these organisations have been going through this process.
You are putting a cloud.
Every time that the Minister of Interior asked for a document, it was shared for every single one of these organisations.
Okay.
But right now, the question is, we want some transparency. It's about the justness. It's about making sure that we've got a dignified handover.
I got your point. Let me finish what I was about to say very quickly. You see, as I started out by saying, there are 70 NGOs that have been granted permission to operate. 23 or 21 of them have been denied. And they have not been denied permanently. They can always file a letter, a petition for reconsideration, or they can come up with removal of those, certain concerns which the concerned Interior Department always shares with you.
But that's what we're looking for. We're looking for transparency in the process. All they've been told is 60 days for an appeal. 60 days you must put in your appeal or stop working in the country. And after that, in 90 days, we'll tell you what the response is. I mean, again, I go back to the reality on the ground. We'd like to see some transparency. And we'd like to see that openness and dialogue. We've been fully committed and supporting the government of Pakistan to regulate the sector. We want that. We've been working with the government since 2013 on this.
Tariq, she makes a good point, doesn't she?
Right now, it goes back.
Yeah. Let me answer that. Pakistan gets a lot of benefit, and I have no denying the fact, there is no denying the fact, Pakistani people get a lot of help from the work that is done by NGOs. I have been in Washington for a very long time.
Pakistani people work in these organisations as well.
Just one second.
It's okay for me to sit in a nice place in Islamabad and forget the fact that these are people that are building their homes.
May I tell you?
Okay, hold on just for a second. I just want to gain a bit of control over here. Nargis made a good point, Tariq, and Talat, I'm going to bring you in a second. Nargis made a great point, Tariq. Pakistani people work in these organisations. A small fraction of them are people who come in from outside. So these people are Pakistani citizens who are losing their jobs as well. Address that before I go to Talat. Tariq?
Very simple. Very good point. Actually, the easiest thing to use an organization is to contact the person or the citizens of that very country and use them. This is the easiest thing. This is the way it is done all over the world.
Oh, look, we're going back to the world of conspiracy theories. We really are. We've got to go back to the fact that the reality on the ground is that 34 million people were reached in 2016 by these NGOs.
Okay, fair enough.
I gave you the example of Red Cross.
I'm sorry, this is far too much conspiracy.
Nargis and Tariq.
I gave you the example of Red Cross.
Okay, Tariq believes Red Cross has been infiltrated. I look forward to whatever comes out of that because for the moment this is anecdotal. For the moment, this is anecdotal. I haven't seen any evidence, but that's another discussion. Let me bring in Talat Masoudia. Talat, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, please, sure. I think the government has been sort of unwise in taking such a harsh and a sort of a decision which has also not helped the Pakistani people who deserve and who have been helped enormously by these organizations. If they had definite proof against some of these organizations, they should have confronted them. It is quite possible that some of these organizations may have been infiltrated. Even the management of that organization may not have known it, and they would have corrected the situation. And I think it's extremely important for Pakistan, even for its own future, in terms of how it deals with the NGOs. Because the NGOs are, when they are doing such good work, and then you find that they have also been, according to Pakistani perspective, infiltrated by some intelligence agencies which are hostile towards Pakistan, then they should know exactly, those organizations should also know that this is the reason. You can't just say that, well, this organization, we will not give any permission to continue, whereas the others would be given permission. I think on one point, I would also like to add that this would have a very bad effect for future as well. And all other organizations which are working within Pakistan will also all the time be on the alert that you never know what sort of a future you have in Pakistan if that be the case.
Okay, I know you're all chomping at the bit. I have bad news for all of you. I have to move on. I don't want to move on, but for the sake of time, I must end this discussion right now. Talat Masood, Nargis Khan and Tariq Parvez, I do appreciate you all coming onto the show and sharing your thoughts with us. Thanks for joining us on the Newsmakers. That's all for this edition of the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garda. You can check out more of our stories on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter. Remember to like, follow and subscribe. Next time, Austria becomes the only European country with a far-right party in power. What does it mean for Turkey's hopes to get into the European Union? Until then, thank you for watching. Bye-bye.